Hey guys, I've got a cool opportunity to compare a Ludwig stainless steel John Bonham reissue kit that they released in 2006 against a 1979 Ludwig stainless steel drum kit, and be able to go over both the similarities and differences aesthetically as well as sonically, and how the drums stack up against each other. I'll save you the excruciating anticipation of watching the entire video and just tell you up front that they're both really, really badass drum kits. They sound great, they look great, the similarities far outweigh the differences, and even still the differences are not damning in any regard whatsoever. So I'm happy to report that up front. I know some people may have opinions about the new shells just sucking 10,000 times worse than the old shells, because the old shells are the old shells, and that's what Bonham played on, and that's where he got his iconic sound. And I mean, there's not much to say against it, but Ronn Dunnett, the guy that produced these new Ludwig reissue stainless steel drums, really did a tremendous job. He only produced 100 of them, so they are a rare commodity. And if ever there was an ample successor to the stainless steel shells from the 70s, that's a tongue twister. Ronn Dunnett has done it. I didn't even mean to do that, but he has done it with the new shells. I'd certainly recommend wearing headphones just to get the most true representation of how the drums actually sound. I will admit up front that the method with which I have conducted this experiment is not the most scientifically sound. The only really controlled variable in all this is going to be the floor toms. With the new set and the old set, they're the same dimensions, the 16 by 16 and the 16 by 18. So I'm going to do a specific analysis of those two sets of drums just so that you can hear if there are any real differences. That being said, again, I've played a little fast and loose with the way I've conducted this as well. Not that I didn't want to be as thorough as possible, but I don't have any modern technology on my side. I've just tuned these to using my ears. I really do need to get like a tune bot or a drum dial, something like that. But I've done my best, and I don't think it's too far off. That being said, I know listening back, since I put this video together before I did all this commentary, that it does sound like maybe one is slightly lower than the other. Still, it's not enough, I think, to detract from the overall qualities of the vintage shells versus the new shells. So you'll still get a good example of what 1979 sounded like versus 2006. When it comes to actually demonstrating what the drums sound like, I'm going to start with the floor toms. I'm going to have a close mic about 2 inches away from the head, and then I'm going to be using an overhead as well, and have those in the first demonstration. And then I'm going to use the same plane but have just the overhead, so that it gives you a better idea about what these drums sound like if you were actually in the room with them and standing 3 or 4 feet away. So you'll be able to hear it in that regard. I'm going to do the same once the kit is all set up. I'm going to have, at least for the first demonstration of what they sound like together, the close mics on with the overheads, and then I'm going to take the close mics off and just have the overheads so you can get that true room sound. There's not going to be any EQ or compression or anything. I've boosted the signal a little bit so it's a little louder, but otherwise these are completely clean and an accurate representation of what the drums sound like. Once I've gone through what the kit sounds like, all set up together, just doing single strokes on each drum, then I will go through and start playing drum parts from Led Zeppelin songs and stuff that I've come up with myself. And at that point, I'll just leave the close mic setup on, because that sounds a little better in my opinion. And you can just kind of hear what both kits sound like. I'll be doing stuff that I recorded originally in the stainless steel drum kit that I posted about 5 years ago. And I'm just revisiting some of those parts for nostalgia. I'll be playing Led Zeppelin songs, Fool in the Rain, Kashmir, stuff like that. And you can just, hear what the drum sounds like. So if you get your fill pretty early on, you can turn it off, after 30 seconds of hearing what the drum sounds like together, because the rest of the video is just going to be a lot of drumming to Zeppelin or ideas I've had. For some of you, you're already familiar with the tuning video I've done and my monotonous voice or my monotone voice, and hopefully that it's not too monotonous. I'll try and animate it a little bit more, but I'm only capable of so much. All right, so we'll start off with the kick drums here. We'll focus in on the badges initially with the round blue and olive badges on the new kit and the pointy blue and olive badges on the old kit. The new drums have a 312 serial number on them, and the old drums have a 157 as the first three numbers. You'll also notice on the new kit that the badge faces towards the resonant head, and on the 79 shell, the badge faces in towards the center, which is typical of all the older drums that came from the 70s. I'm guessing Ron Dunnett actually had to convince Ludwig to even let him place the badge where it is, because most modern Ludwigs have the badge positioned by the batter head and not by the resonant head. And we'll focus on the curved spurs next. The vintage kit comes with the 5/16 inch curved spurs. I know around 79-80 that they started introducing the half-inch curved spurs as well, but these actually came with the 5/16, as did Bonham's. And on the newer shells, the 2006 shells, they have half-inch spurs. However, I have replaced the half-inch with 5/16 to be more era authentic to what Bonham played. You can also see the wood panels that they've added to reinforce certain parts of the drum shell, particularly where the spurs are connected, and also up top where the rack tom is connected. They've got a wood panel up there as well, just to help the drum keep its shape and bear the tremendous weight that comes down on the shell, which we'll talk about soon. The vintage kit also has a kind of reinforcement plate on the top only, where the tom mount would be connected, again, I think to help maintain the structure and support for whatever weight is bared upon it. The plate you're seeing here is made of metal, not wood like the other one, although this would work actually in the new kit because you use the fastening screws to attach it. However, it does call out the biggest difference in that it rests on the 45-degree rounded bearing edges that the 79 shell has, which the new 2006 shell does not have. There are no bearing edges, really. It's just a flat shell in terms of what the drum head rests up against versus the rounded over 45-degree bearing edges. We'll spend a bit more time as we go through the other drums as well. So you can see the tone control knob, which both the new and the vintage shells do have, on the floor toms at least. Again, the pointy blue and olive badge on the 79 shell, and we're going to have the rounded blue and olive badge on the new shells, and that applies to all the drums. You can see the leg mount there with the smaller wing nut screw, which will be in contrast to the larger fastener that the more modern Ludwig leg mounts have. They look exactly the same except for that attachment. The vintage ones use the smaller wing nut screws, and the new ones use a bigger fastener. So that's a little different. Other thing, kind of a modern convenience, is the mounting screws on the new shells have rivets that allow you to use a screwdriver. If you've ever worked with a vintage shell before, or vintage lugs that have the vintage mounting screws, you'll find, or you'll know, that they actually don't have any rivets in them, and you have to use a wrench to tighten them and get them on and off. So, well, I've certainly gotten used to the older mounting screws and actually kind of prefer the look of them. It does save quite a few minutes off your life being able to use a screwdriver on the newer shells, so that's nice. You've got gaskets in between the lugs and the shells. I don't believe gaskets came stock on some of the older 70 shells, except for maybe on the Vista-Lite kits. But on the newer shells, you've got the felt gasket between the lug and the shell. You can see again the bearing edges and the difference between the two. The floor tom leg mounts also are in different positions on the new shell versus where they are on the old shell. At least the front one is. If you look at the badge at the front of the drum, on the new shell, it's to the left of the badge, and on the old shell, it's to the right of the badge. You can see that right there. The new shells also have spacers in between the floor tom leg mounts and the shells, just to give it a little added clearance from the rim. Sometimes with the older shells, the legs can actually bend a little bit and start pressing up against the rims. You can get some vibrating. It can choke the the head a little bit. So the spacers are nice. Again, aesthetically, it's kind of one of those modern conveniences that when you're used to older drums, you're like, I don't like this. But it does serve a purpose. It's nice to have. This is a good time to talk about something I've alluded to so far, but actually haven't addressed, and something that you also can't see. But the weight difference between the drums is pretty substantial. I find the 79 shells to be pretty comparable in weight, actually, to wood shells of that era. For example, the kick drum probably weighs 10 to 12 pounds. It's actually not that heavy. I know that's a common perception of stainless steel drums, and maybe certain ones were. These are not actually that heavy. The new shells are at least 2, if not 3 times heavier than that. The kick drum, even with bigger dimensions, still weighs 25 to 28 pounds. To a certain extent, some of the added weight is the more modern hardware, which, even though aesthetically it looks the same, is a little more robust, meant to be able to weather a bit more. The lugs are lighter on the older shells versus how heavy they are on the new shells. That being said, I've stripped everything off, and the shells just by themselves are still significantly heavier on the new kit than they are on the old kit. Another difference between the two kits is the tom mount that comes with each respective kit. The 79 shells came with a 79 tom mount, and it's the same kind that John Bonham played and used, and the new kit came with a new tom mount. So those two are slightly different. I've ended up switching out the tom mount on the old kit and placing it on the new kit. It still bears the weight and holds the tom in place without any issues, at least so far. And I've placed the new tom mount on the vintage kit. So that's what you'll see when we get to the drum kit all set up. You've got the rack toms at this point. The 79 shell does have a tone control knob right above the badge. And if I'm not mistaken, in pictures I've seen, even though they're not always clear, the 12x15 that Bonham had custom ordered, his rack tom, I believe did have a tone control knob. So that's, if I'm wrong, then I'm wrong, and Dunnett got it right. But I feel like I've seen pictures where, at least in a couple of them, the tone control knob was there. And that is one aspect of this set that's been omitted. If I'm right, I don't know. I'll have to go back and check that out. The 12x15 still has the bow tie lugs and the longer tension rods, which is accurate. Again, you've got a modern Ludwig mount, which is very similar to the vintage mounts. Apart from the fastener, it's the same as the floor tom leg mounts, same as what you'd attach, obviously, the rack tom. The L-arm cymbal stand that attaches to the bass drum uses the same kind of mount. And so really, when you tally everything up, in terms of differences, aesthetically speaking, there are really only 9, potentially 10 things that are different between the two kits. You got the bearing edges and the weight, which are the biggest difference between the new shells and the old shells. And if there's any difference in the tonal quality of the drums, then it would probably lie in those two factors right there. Apart from that, you've got the badges, the pointy cornered badges versus the rounded cornered badges. You've got the curved spurs, the 5/16 inch curved spurs versus the 1/2 inch curved spurs. You've got the floor tom leg mount placement, one being on the left, one being on the right. You've got the mounting screws, again, insignificant. The tom mount, which is understandable given I don't think Ludwig is producing the same kind of tom mount that they were making back in the late 70s. The gaskets, again, underneath the lugs, which is not a bad thing. It's an added luxury. The spacers, same thing. And then potentially the rack tom doesn't have a tone control knob, which I will readily admit I could be wrong about. So I really wouldn't even count that. But if you've seen pictures and you know that there was a tone control knob, I believe right above the badge, then maybe they accidentally omitted that. So. Oh, and the support plates, the wood support plates on the new shells versus the metal support plate that is on the 79 shell, both which help bear the tremendous weight of incredibly beautiful rack toms. I'll also make a quick mention of the drum heads and the style of tuning I'm using. The drum heads on all the toms, both the new shells and the old shells, are Remo-coated Emperors on the top. And that's for the 15-inch, the 16-inch, and the 18-inch. Remo-coated Emperor on top, and Remo coated Ambassador on the bottom. On the kick drums, I have a vintage Ludwig Weathermaster single ply drum head that's on the new shell. And then on the older shell, I have a Ludwig Weathermaster single ply new head, one that comes with, I believe it's the script writing. I just took some nail polish to that, scrubbed it around, it comes off, and then I put down the block logo like they had in the 70s, and that's what you see there. On the batter head, I'm using a Remo coated Power Stroke 4. It's the drum head that has the internal dampening ring around, kind of like you'd see on Bonham's resonant head, actually, back in the early 70s, late 60s, with the maple thermoglass kit and the green sparkle kit. I actually am using that on the batter side. It is what came with the 79 drum set, and I loved it, and so I've stuck with that. And I actually got that for the new kit when that arrived. So, and here's a quick bit of trivia for you, if you didn't know it already. Bonham switched back to the 10x14 rack tom on the 1980 European tour. The style of tuning is going to be the same as the other drums that Bonham used. It's going to have the batter side pitched up higher than you'd be accustomed to, kind of medium to medium high. And then the resonant side is going to be pitched higher than that, about a third step up from what the batter side is tuned at. So that's the way I've got these tuned, the rack tom in particular, just to make sure that the 15-inch distinguishes itself from the 16-inch. I made sure to pitch that up even a tiny bit higher, which you've already heard in the at the beginning of the drum video, and you'll hear coming up here very shortly. And this is going to be random, but I just read a bit of good news too while I was recording this commentary that J.K. Simmons just won the Best Supporting Actor for Whiplash. Guys, if you haven't seen Whiplash, I highly recommend going and checking it out. It transcends just the fact that it's a movie about drumming. It's about pushing yourself to be outstanding and as great as you possibly can be, and even a little bit above that. So as musicians, as artists of any kind, if you haven't seen Whiplash, you owe it to yourself to go check it out, because there are no two words more harmful in the English language than good job. So hats off to J.K. Simmons. He killed it. He fully deserved that one, in my opinion. So I'm happy to see that he won it. And if you've seen it, chime in below. Share the love. It can't get enough of it. So yeah, check out Whiplash. And apart from that, I'm going to stop blabbering. We'll just kind of ride off into the sunset here with the Ludwig stainless steel kits speaking for themselves. There aren't nearly enough examples of what these kits sound like out there, so I realize how fortunate I am to be in a position to play them, and I want to make sure I can share as much as I possibly can with you guys, because if I didn't have these drum kits, I would be scouring the internet, trying to spend as much time finding out as much information and how they sound and all that good stuff. So I'm really, really happy to be able to share this stuff with you. I'm just going to let the drums speak for themselves. I really appreciate all the support you guys have given me, and I hope you enjoy this, and until next time.